Cole Bannister walked into the Broken Spoke Saloon looking for a drink. He walked out with a dead man at his feet. But the body cooling in the sawdust wasn't the problem. The problem was what came next. The dust of a 3-day ride clung to him like a second skin. He pushed through the bat-wing doors and the noise hit him first. A tinny piano, cheap laughter, the smell of whiskey and sweat. He scanned the room, a habit that had kept him alive for 20 years. Most men were lost in their cards or their liquor, but one man wasn't. A red-faced drunk at the end of the bar locked eyes with him. It was a stare that promised trouble. Cole ignored him, ordering a whiskey from the barkeep. "Just passing through," Cole said, his voice like gravel. The drunk stumbled over. "I know you," he slurred. "You're that Yankee killer from Illinois." The room went quiet. The piano stopped. Every eye in the place was on them. "You rode with Sherman," the man snarled, his hand drifting toward the gun on his hip. "My brother died at Shiloh, shot by cowards like you." Cole set his glass down, very carefully. "You're mistaken." "The hell I am. They call you Quick Draw Cole. Say you killed a dozen men since the war." He spat on the floor. "You're having your last drink, Yankee." His hand dropped. Cole moved. It wasn't even a choice. It was instinct. A flash of steel, a single deafening crack, and the drunk, a man named Horace, stood frozen. A dark stain bloomed on his chest. He looked down, surprised, then crumpled to the floor. Silence. Cole holstered his revolver, his heart hammering against his ribs. The batwing doors swung open. A man with a tarnished star on his chest stepped inside. "Christ almighty," Sheriff James Blackwood sighed, looking from the body to Cole's smoking gun. "Not even sundown." "Self-defense," the barkeep mumbled. "Horace drew first. We all saw it." The sheriff nodded. "You got a name, stranger?" "Cole Bannister." "Well, Mr. Bannister," the sheriff said, "your shooting's legal, but I suggest you ride on come morning. Horace has kin. They don't care much for legal." As Cole pushed back out into the fading light, the sheriff followed him. "One more thing," Blackwood said quietly. "I was at Antietam. I know the look of a man who's seen what we saw." He paused. "Whatever you're looking for, I hope you find it before your past catches up to you." Cole said nothing. He just mounted his horse and rode away, the weight of one more death settling on his shoulders. What he didn't know was that his past wasn't just catching up to him. It was waiting for him. That night, the ghosts of Gettysburg came for him. Cannon fire, the smell of blood, the screams. He sat by his fire, the Wyoming night vast and cold around him. 22 years had passed since he was a 19-year-old farm boy, charging across that open field. He remembered the smoke, the chaos, in the face of the Confederate officer. A boy, really, with fierce, aristocratic eyes. "I don't want to shoot you," Cole had screamed over the roar of battle. The young officer had just smiled. "Then today you die," he'd replied, raising his pistol. Cole's shot was true. As the young man fell, a locket dropped from his hand. Cole scooped it up. Inside was a portrait of a beautiful woman. Later, he'd found papers on the officer's body. Lieutenant Robert Harrington of Virginia. He'd tried to send the locket to the man's family, but the war had interfered. His own family was burned out by Confederate raiders 3 months later. Mother, father, sisters, all gone. The locket and the guilt that came with it was all he had left of that time. He'd tried being a lawman after the war, but justice was a complicated thing. Too often it belonged to the man with the most money, so he drifted west, haunted by the dead. Now he was tired of running. An advertisement in a Denver paper had caught his eye. Land for sale in a place called Redemption Valley. The name called to him. Maybe this was it, a place to finally build something, to balance the scales of his life. He rode toward Redemption Valley, wondering if a man like him could ever truly be redeemed. He was about to find out that redemption sometimes comes at a terrible price. The valley opened up before him like a promised land, green and cradled by mountains. The town was bigger than he'd expected, with a church spire reaching for the sky and the dark frame of a mine perched on a distant hill. He rode down the main street, feeling the eyes of the town on him. A trail-worn stranger was always an object of suspicion. He stopped at Morgan's Mercantile, the general store. The proprietor was a big black man with a firm handshake and intelligent eyes. Jacob Morgan, he said. What can I help you with? Cole Bannister, I'm here about the Stevens land sale. Jacob's expression grew cautious. Old man Stevens passed a couple months back. His widow's handling it. You planning to settle? That's the idea. Jacob leaned closer, his voice dropping. Then you'd best know how things stand. That land sits right next to William Harrington's property. Prime water access. Harrington? Owns the mine, Jacob said, his eyes conveying more than his words. Owns the biggest cattle spread, owns the mortgage on half this town, came west after the war and made a fortune. Some say too quickly. Cole listened, his face a mask. He's been trying to buy that land for years, Jacob continued. But Hiram Stevens was a stubborn man. Said he didn't like how Harrington treated his workers. Didn't like how men who crossed him had a habit of having accidents. Just then, the bell on the door chimed. A tall man with a silver star pinned to his vest walked in. Sheriff Thomas Tanner. Don't believe we've met, the sheriff said, his eyes cold. He didn't offer his hand. Cole Bannister, Cole replied. Looking to settle. The Stevens homestead. The sheriff's face tightened. Redemption is a peaceful town, Mr. Bannister. We like to keep it that way. That makes two of us. You've worn a badge before, Tanner stated. It wasn't a question. In another life. Well, in this life, I'm the law here. Remember that. As Cole left the store, he heard the sheriff mutter, just what we need. Another gunslinger. He had been in town less than an hour, and he'd already made an enemy of the law. This wasn't the fresh start he'd been hoping for, but he was determined. He rode toward the church to find Mrs. Stevens. He knocked on the door of the small cottage behind the church. It was opened by a young woman with auburn hair, intelligent green eyes, and a fire burning just beneath her formal surface. I'm looking for Mrs. Stevens, Cole said. I'm Caroline Bennett. May I ask your business with my aunt? Cole Bannister. I'm here to buy the homestead. Something flickered in her eyes. Are you associated with Mr. Harrington? No, ma'am. Just a man looking for a place to call his own. She led him inside to meet her aunt. Mrs. Stevens was frail, her face etched with grief, but her eyes were sharp. Why do you want Hiram's land? She demanded. Cole answered honestly. I saw your husband's advertisement. It mentioned good water, fertile soil, and it mentioned redemption. That word, it means something to me. The old woman's gaze softened. It meant something to Hiram, too. He said every man deserved a second chance. She looked him up and down. The price is $800, cash, and one condition. You must live on the land for 5 years. No selling, especially not to William Harrington. It was a strange condition, but Cole agreed. He counted out the money, nearly every dollar he had in the world. As Caroline Bennett notarized the deed, she gave him a warning. You should know, Mr. Bannister, she said quietly, by purchasing this land, you have likely made a powerful enemy. So I gather. The land was everything he'd hoped for. A perfect bowl of fertile soil, a creek running along one side, and the half-finished frame of a cabin on a small rise. For the first time in years, Cole felt a flicker of peace. That peace was shattered at dawn. He woke to the sound of horses. He grabbed his rifle and moved to the window. 6 riders were approaching, and one of them was Caroline Bennett. Cole stepped out of the cabin, his rifle held ready. Didn't expect a welcoming committee? Caroline's face was pale. Mr. Bannister, she started, then trailed off. An older rancher named Peterson spoke up. One of my hands found something this morning. On your land. Thought you should see for yourself. A cold feeling settled in Cole's stomach. He followed them to a stand of ancient oak trees a quarter mile from the cabin. And there it was. A man's body was hanging from a thick branch, twisting slowly in the morning breeze. He was a Mexican man, dressed in simple work clothes. Nailed to the tree trunk was a crude sign. It read, Harrington Justice for Thieves. Cole's jaw tightened. Anyone know him? Luis Rodriguez, one of the ranchers said, worked at the Harrington Ranch. Good hand. What was he supposed to have stolen? Rumor was some cattle went missing, Peterson said. Harrington blamed the Mexican workers. No proof that I heard. Cole studied the ground. Multiple boot prints. This wasn't a mob. This was a professional job. And they chose this location deliberately, he said, looking at Peterson. It's a message to you, the rancher said grimly. First day on your property, and Harrington's already showing you who runs this valley. Cole told Caroline to ride for the sheriff. As she galloped toward town, they cut the body down. In the dead man's pocket, Cole found a small wooden cross and a letter in Spanish. He tucked them away. He would see they got to the man's family. Word of advice, Bannister, Peterson said. Whatever brought you here, it might not be worth your life. Harrington doesn't take kindly to folks who don't bend. I just spent my last dollar on this land, Cole said flatly. I'm not inclined to give it up. Just then, hoofbeats announced Caroline's return. She wasn't alone. Sheriff Tanner was with her, and beside him on a magnificent black stallion was a silver-haired, distinguished-looking man in his 60s. Cole knew, without being told, he was looking at William Harrington. Harrington surveyed the scene with cold blue eyes. So, you're the newcomer, he said, his voice dripping with Virginia aristocracy. Seems you've had an inauspicious start to your time in redemption. Finding a murdered man on my property wasn't in my plans, Cole replied. Murdered? Harrington raised an eyebrow. Sheriff, our new neighbor accuses me of murder. Hanging's a legal punishment for theft in this territory. After a trial, Cole shot back. Was there a trial, Sheriff? Rodriguez confessed, Harrington said smoothly. To me, frontier justice allows for certain expediences. He met Cole's gaze. I do apologize for the inconvenience, Mr. Bannister. The man's arrogance was breathtaking. He had ordered a man lynched and left on Cole's property as a threat, and now he was apologizing for the inconvenience. Then Harrington did something unexpected. He smiled. Perhaps you'll join me for dinner tomorrow evening, as amends for this unfortunate introduction. It wasn't a request. It was a command. He then turned to Caroline. Miss Bennett, always a pleasure. Do remind your aunt my offer for the property still stands, should Mr. Bannister find valley life unsuitable. With a tip of his hat, he rode off, leaving Cole standing in the shadow of the hanging tree. That man, Cole said quietly, is dangerous. More than you know, Caroline replied. You must be careful at dinner. William Harrington doesn't do anything without a purpose. I don't plan on accepting. You must, she insisted. Refusing will only make it worse. My father used to say, know thine enemy. If you're going to stay here, you need to understand who you're facing. You seem to know him well. Her eyes darkened. After my father died, Harrington offered me marriage. A business arrangement, he called it. He needed a respectable wife. I needed a patron for the church. Her jaw tightened. I declined. He took the parsonage for his mine office anyway. She looked at him, her expression serious. Be careful, Mr. Bannister. Whatever you say or do, he will know about it. As she rode away, Cole looked back at the hanging tree. He ripped the sign from the trunk and broke it over his knee. He had come to Redemption Valley seeking peace. Instead, he'd walked into a war. The sensible thing to do was to sell the land and ride on. But as he looked out over the valley that was now his, he knew he wasn't running. Not this time. The Harrington mansion sat on a hill overlooking the valley, a monument to wealth and power. Cole rode up dressed in his cleanest shirt, feeling like a drifter playing at being a gentleman. The house was filled with polished mahogany and crystal chandeliers. It was a piece of the Old South transplanted to the rugged Wyoming frontier. Harrington greeted him in a study filled with leather-bound books and hunting trophies. Mr. Bannister, he said, pouring 2 glasses of expensive bourbon, punctuality is a virtue. They sat, and Harrington got straight to the point, his casual tone belying the menace underneath. I understand you've already started repairs on the cabin. Jacob Morgan delivered your lumber yesterday. Cole's face didn't change, but he noted the message. I'm watching you. They moved to a massive dining room, seated at opposite ends of a table long enough for 20. The meal was a polite, civilized dance of words. They talked about the weather, the prospects of the valley, anything and everything except the dead man hanging from a tree. It was over dessert that Harrington finally showed his hand. Mr. Bannister, I'll be plain. The Stevens property is of great interest to me. There is a rich coal seam that runs right under it. He dabbed his lips with a napkin. I will offer you $2,000 for the land, more than double what you paid. Mrs. Stevens attached a condition to the sale. I can't sell for 5 years. Legal conditions, Harrington said with a dismissive wave, can be amended, especially when it benefits all parties. And if I prefer to keep the land? Something in Harrington's eyes went cold. You witnessed yesterday how difficult frontier life can be. Accidents happen. A man alone faces considerable challenges. The threat was no longer veiled. It was sitting right there on the polished dining table between them. I've faced challenges before, Cole said. You were a Union man, weren't you? Harrington asked, changing the subject. I served as well. Confederate cavalry. Later, on General Lee's staff. He studied Cole, his eyes like chips of ice. Strange how war makes enemies of men who might otherwise respect one another. The war has been over for 20 years, Cole said. Has it? Harrington's smile was thin and cruel. Some wounds, Mr. Bannister, never heal. He stood. Consider my offer. $2,000 would set you up comfortably anywhere else in this territory. We could be allies, you and I. As Cole was leaving, Harrington added one last thing. I understand you've become acquainted with Miss Bennett. She is a remarkable woman. I consider myself her protector. The possessive tone was unmistakable. Even capable women need guidance in this harsh country. Riding away from the mansion, Cole felt the night air cool on his face. The dinner had been a warning wrapped in silk gloves. Harrington wanted the land, and he would get it one way or another. He was so lost in thought, he almost missed the figure waiting for him by the split rock near his property. He reined in sharply, his hand dropping to his gun. It's only me, Mr. Bannister. Caroline Bennett emerged from the shadows, mounted on her horse. Riding alone at night seems risky, Cole said. Some risks are necessary, she replied. I needed to speak with you. Did he offer to buy your land? $2,000. She nodded. And when you refused? I told him I'd consider it. Wise, she said, her voice tense. Mr. Bannister, there are things about William Harrington you don't know. They rode toward his cabin, the creek murmuring beside them. 3 years ago, she began, my father discovered that Harrington was stealing from the church, diverting money meant for widows and orphans to his mine. Did he go to the sheriff? Caroline let out a bitter laugh. Sheriff Tanner? He is Harrington's man. No, my father confronted Harrington directly. He threatened to go to the territorial governor. She swallowed hard. A week later, my father was dead. An accident. They said he slipped and fell from the church roof, but my father was as sure-footed as a goat. He'd fixed that roof a dozen times. You think Harrington had him killed? I know it, she said fiercely. And there have been others. A newspaper editor who investigated the finances. A miner who complained about safety. Hiram Stevens, who refused to sell this land. They all had accidents. They reached the cabin. Why are you telling me this? Cole asked. Because I saw the way you looked Harrington in the eye at the hanging tree, she said, and because I know what he does to those who stand in his way. She looked up at him. Did he mention the war? He said he was Confederate cavalry. Harrington lost his only son at Gettysburg, she said, her voice barely a whisper. Lieutenant Robert Harrington. Since then, he has harbored a special kind of hatred for Union veterans. A cold weight settled in Cole's stomach. Robert Harrington. The name echoed in his memory, a ghost from a smoke-filled battlefield 22 years ago. How do you know these details? He asked carefully. My father was a chaplain in the Union Army. He kept journals. He wrote about a young Confederate lieutenant named Robert Harrington who died bravely. The pieces were aligning with a sickening, impossible clarity. He had killed William Harrington's son, and now by some cruel twist of fate, he had bought the very land Harrington craved, bringing him face to face with the father of the man whose death had haunted him for decades. Mr. Bannister? Caroline's voice broke through his shock. Are you all right? Just tired, he managed to say. She prepared to leave. I only wanted to warn you, she said. Harrington's threats are not idle. If you're determined to stay, be on your guard. He watched her ride into the darkness, his mind reeling. Of all the valleys in all the territories, he had chosen this one. Was this God's punishment, or just a cruel joke? He went into his half-finished cabin, and sat in the darkness, the face of the young lieutenant he'd shot at Gettysburg burning in his mind. He could run, sell the land, disappear again. It's what he'd always done. But as dawn broke over Redemption Valley, Cole Bannister made a decision. He was done running. He would stay. And if William Harrington discovered the truth of what happened at Gettysburg, then so be it. Some debts had to be paid. Sunday morning, Cole walked into town and took a seat in the back pew of the church. He was surprised to see Carolyn Bennett take the pulpit. She delivered a sermon about David and Goliath, about standing up to tyrants, her eyes flicking from Cole to William Harrington, who sat in the front row like a king in his court. The message was clear. After the service, as Cole was leaving, an elderly black woman approached him. "Mr. Bannister, I'm Sarah Washington. I manage Mr. Harrington's household." "Ma'am," Cole nodded respectfully. "I've worked for the Harrington family since before the war," she said, her voice low. "I know men of violence. You carry it differently." She looked him dead in the eye. "Miss Caroline has taken an interest in you. That puts you in danger. Grief changes a man, Mr. Bannister. Sometimes it twists him into something unrecognizable. Be careful." Before he could ask what she meant, she was gone, melting back into the crowd. He saw Harrington trying to corner Caroline, inviting her to tea. He saw her politely refuse. Then Harrington approached him. "Have you reconsidered my offer, Mr. Bannister?" "I have," Cole said. "The land is not for sale." A flash of pure fury crossed Harrington's face before he masked it with a cold smile. "Consider carefully before refusing my generosity. Redemption Valley can be a very hostile place for those who don't align themselves correctly." He walked away, his cronies, including Sheriff Tanner, following in his wake. "You've made a powerful enemy," Jacob Morgan said, coming to stand beside Cole. "So, I gather." The walk back to his cabin was tense. He felt eyes on him the whole way. As he neared his property, 3 riders emerged from the trees. It was Harrington's foreman, Jackson, the same man who had overseen the hanging of Luis Rodriguez. "Afternoon, Bannister," Jackson sneered. "The boss wanted us to see if you'd reconsidered his generous offer." "I gave him my answer," Cole said, stopping in the middle of the trail. "The thing is," Jackson said, nudging his horse closer, "the boss doesn't take no for an answer. Not from a Yankee." He smiled, a nasty, ugly thing. "Accidents happen out here. A man alone, building a cabin. It's dangerous work. Would be a shame if you got pinned under something. Might not be found for days." Cole's patience snapped. "Move aside," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Or demonstrate if you're as good with that gun as you are with a rope." For a second, Jackson looked like he was going to draw, but Cole didn't flinch. The foreman spat on the ground. "This ain't over, Bannister," he snarled, wheeling his horse around. "Nobody talks to Harrington's men that way." As they rode off, Cole called after them. "Tell your boss I'm not selling. Not now. Not ever." The confrontation confirmed it. Harrington wasn't just going to threaten him. He was going to try and kill him. Cole spent the rest of the day working on his cabin, his rifle never far from his hand. As dusk settled, a lone rider approached, galloping hard. It was Caroline. She threw herself from her horse, her face frantic. "You have to leave," she gasped. "Now. Tonight. What is it? What's happened?" "Harrington knows," she said, her voice shaking. "He knows who you are. He knows it was you at Gettysburg." The cold dread he'd been fighting washed over him. "How?" "He showed me a letter from a man who served with his son, someone who witnessed his death at the hands of a Union soldier named Cole Bannister." Her eyes were wide. "He knows you killed his son." "I've carried that moment for 22 years, Cole said, his voice hollow. "Then you understand. He's waited all this time for revenge. He's not going to stop until you're dead." Sarah, the housekeeper, she overheard him. "He's ordered Jackson to make an example of you. Tonight." "I'm not running," Cole said. "This isn't about courage," she pleaded, grabbing his arm. "It's suicide. He controls everything here." "If he wants vengeance," Cole said, his eyes fixed on the distant lights of the Harrington mansion, "let him come for it himself, not send his hired guns in the night." Just then, they heard it, the sound of multiple horses, moving steadily toward the cabin. "They're coming," Caroline whispered, her face pale in the firelight. Cole kicked dirt over the fire, plunging them into darkness. "Inside," he ordered. "Stay away from the windows." He lit a small lamp inside the cabin, then handed her a small derringer from his saddlebag. "Last resort only," he said. She took it with a steady hand. "I know how to use it." He peered through a crack in the shutters. 5 of them. Jackson and his crew. He turned to her, his expression grim. "There's a root cellar under the rug. If this goes bad, you hide there." "They'll burn the cabin," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "Then we'd better make sure they don't get the chance." He moved to the door. "Caroline, if I don't make it, tell the truth. About my father. About everything." "It won't come to that," she whispered. "We'll see." He slipped out into the darkness, leaving her alone in the cabin. The ghost of Gettysburg had finally followed him west, and the reckoning was about to begin. Cole crouched behind a woodpile, the moonlight painting the clearing in shades of silver and black. He watched as Jackson and his men dismounted, fanning out as they advanced on the cabin. They thought he was trapped inside. "Bannister!" Jackson yelled. "Come on out. Face justice for Lieutenant Harrington. Do it clean, and the woman doesn't get hurt." Cole stayed silent. Let them guess. Let them get nervous. Then one of them lit a torch. They were going to burn him out. He raised his rifle, sighting on the man with the torch. His finger tightened on the trigger, but before he could fire, the cabin door flew open. Caroline stood framed in the light, a figure of impossible courage. "Mr. Jackson," she called out, her voice ringing with authority. "Sheriff Tanner is on his way, along with the judge from the county seat. They know I'm here, and they know why." It was a bluff, a beautiful, reckless bluff. And for a moment, it worked. Jackson hesitated. "You're lying, woman." "Am I?" she countered. "I sent a messenger to town. The same messenger who has been carrying my letters for the past year, documenting every crime William Harrington has committed in this valley." Jackson's men looked at each other, suddenly uncertain. This wasn't the simple execution they'd signed up for. "Enough talk!" Jackson roared, sensing he was losing control. He hurled the torch. It landed on the dry porch, which erupted in flames. Cole fired. His bullet slammed into Jackson's shoulder, spinning him around with a scream. The other men scattered, firing wildly into the darkness. Bullets splintered the woodpile next to Cole. He rolled, fired twice more, and sprinted for the back of the cabin as the fire on the porch grew into a roaring inferno. The back window of the cabin shattered. "Cole!" Caroline yelled. "This way!" He scrambled through the broken window into the smoke-filled room. "We have to get out," he coughed. "The root cellar," she gasped, pulling him toward the center of the room. "It has an escape tunnel. Hiram Stevens built it. He knew Harrington would come for him one day." She wrenched open the trap door. They scrambled down the ladder just as heavy boots stomped into the burning cabin above. The tunnel was narrow and dark, shored up with timbers. They crawled on their hands and knees, the sounds of shouting and the roar of the fire fading behind them. "Did you really send a messenger?" Cole asked as they moved through the darkness. "No," she admitted, but Jackson didn't know that. He had to smile. Quick thinking. The tunnel opened up into the creek bed, hidden beneath a tangle of willow roots. They emerged into the cool night air, the orange glow of their burning home lighting up the sky behind them. "You saved my life," Cole said. "Twice." "Caroline," she corrected him. "I think we're past formalities." "Cole," he agreed. "Where will you go now?" she asked, looking at the fire. "This isn't over," he said grimly. "You can't stay. Harrington will send more men. Better men." "It has to end, Caroline. Not just for me. For your father. For Luis Rodriguez. For everyone. You're talking about killing him. I'm talking about justice." She was silent for a moment. Then she said, "There's an old line cabin on the Peterson Ranch, north of here. You can hide there. You should go to town. You'll be safer. Harrington knows I helped you. His men saw me. If I go back to town, I'll be at his mercy. I'm safer with you." She was right. They set off through the darkness, following the creek. From somewhere behind them, they heard the sounds of Jackson's men beginning their search. They scrambled up a ridge, hiding in a thicket as the riders passed below. Harrington's offering 500 for Bannister, dead or alive, one of the men said. 200 for the Bennett woman, alive only. The words sent a chill down Cole's spine. He wants you alive, Caroline whispered, her voice tight with fear. You know too much, Cole said. He'll want to make an example of you. They reached the Peterson line cabin just before dawn. The door was ajar. Cole moved in silently, rifle ready. The cabin was empty, but it looked like someone had been there recently. He barred the door, and Caroline sank onto a chair, exhausted. Cole took up watch by the window. Why did you really come to Redemption Valley? She asked softly from the darkness. He told her. About being a lawman? About seeing justice fail? About looking for a place to stop running from the ghosts of his past? And now Gettysburg has caught up to you, she said. It seems so. You could still leave, she suggested. Start fresh somewhere else. And you, would you leave? This is my home, she said simply. My father's work isn't finished. Then neither is mine, Cole said. I'm tired of running. A soft noise from outside froze them, the nicker of a horse. Cole doused the lamp. They waited in the darkness, barely breathing. A soft knock came at the door. Miss Bennett? Mr. Bannister? A voice whispered. It's Jacob Morgan. It could be a trap. Step away from the door, hands in the air, Cole called out. It's just me and Sarah Washington, Jacob replied. We're alone. Cole opened the door. It was them. Jacob, the shopkeeper, and Sarah, Harrington's elderly housekeeper. Thank God, Jacob breathed. We came to warn you. You're not safe here. Harrington has sent telegrams everywhere offering a reward. He's hiring every gun he can find. For one man? Cole asked. For his son's killer, Sarah corrected gently. That hatred has consumed him for 22 years. He won't stop. We have to get you out of the territory, Jacob urged. I have a wagon hidden. We can get you to the railroad. Caroline shook her head. I can't leave. Your work will end with a rope if Harrington catches you, Jacob argued. He's telling everyone you conspired with Bannister to murder his men. Truth needs witnesses, Miss Bennett, Sarah said softly, and Harrington is eliminating them, one by one. Cole looked at Sarah. Why are you helping us? You've served his family your whole life. I served the Harringtons when they were honorable, she said with quiet dignity. What Mr. William has become, that is not the family I served. The choice was clear. They had to run. But Caroline was resolute. My father's journals, she insisted. They're hidden in the cottage. They contain everything. Proof of Harrington's crimes. Without them, it's just our word against his. Going back into town was suicide. The cottage would be watched. But she was right. Without proof, they had nothing. I'll go, Cole said. No, I know the hiding place, Caroline argued. It was Sarah who came up with the plan. A desperate, dangerous plan. I will create a diversion, she said. Mr. Williams still trusts me. I will go to him, tell him I have information on your whereabouts. At the same time, Jacob will set a fire in one of the abandoned mine shacks on the other side of town. It should draw the sheriff away. That will give you two the chance to slip into the cottage. It was insane, but it was the only chance they had. As dawn broke, they set off. Jacob and Sarah went straight to town. Cole and Caroline circled wide, hiding in the hills overlooking Redemption. They watched as Sheriff Tanner galloped down the main street, gathering a posse. They already know, Caroline whispered. They've been in the cottage. Just then, smoke billowed up from the south side of town. Jacob's diversion. The crowd's attention shifted. This was their chance. They slipped into town, moving through back alleys until they reached the cottage. The back window was unlocked. They climbed inside. Caroline went straight to the fireplace, reaching up into the chimney. Her face fell. It's gone, she whispered. The hiding place is empty. A floorboard creaked behind them. Cole spun around, his revolver in his hand. But it was too late. Sheriff Tanner stood in the doorway, a shotgun leveled at Cole's chest. And behind him stood William Harrington. In his hand, he held a leather-bound journal. Looking for this, Miss Bennett? Harrington asked, his voice like silk. Fascinating reading. Your father had quite the imagination. Drop the gun, Bannister, Tanner growled. You're under arrest for murder and conspiracy. And what about Gettysburg? Cole asked quietly, his eyes locked on Harrington. Am I to be tried for that too? For doing my duty? Harrington's face twisted in pain. My son was a Virginia gentleman, cut down by a Yankee butcher. Your son died a soldier's death, Cole said, and I know he carried a gold locket with a portrait of your wife. I tried to return it. For a single fleeting moment, something other than hatred flickered in Harrington's eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by ice. A convenient story, he hissed. Take them to the jail. We'll have a proper trial before a proper hanging. As Tanner moved forward, a gunshot cracked outside, followed by shouting. Sheriff, the fire's spreading to the mine office, and someone's busted Morgan out of the lockup. Tanner hesitated. Damn it all. Watch these two, he snarled at Harrington and rushed out. They were alone with Harrington. 22 years, Harrington said, raising a small pistol he'd drawn from his coat. I have waited 22 years for this. The war is over, Caroline pleaded, stepping between them. Robert wouldn't have wanted this. Don't you dare speak his name, Harrington screamed, his control finally shattering. You know nothing. Caroline, stay back, Cole warned. Step aside, Miss Bennet, Harrington said, his voice deadly calm, or I will kill you first and make him watch. Before anyone could move, the cottage door burst open again. Sarah Washington stood there, and in her hands she held a shotgun. That's enough, Mr. William, she said, her voice steady. Harrington stared in disbelief. Sarah? You're betraying me? I'm choosing right over wrong, she said. Something you used to understand before grief poisoned your soul. Harrington laughed, a terrible, hollow sound. So be it, he whispered. If I am to meet my son in the hereafter, I will not go alone. His finger tightened on the trigger. 3 gunshots exploded, so close together they sounded like one. When the smoke cleared, William Harrington lay dead on the floor. Sarah Washington stood in the doorway, the shotgun in her hands, a trickle of blood running down her arm where Harrington's bullet had grazed her. You killed him, Caroline gasped. He was going to kill you both, Sarah replied simply. She handed the journal to Caroline. Now go. Find the judge in Laramie. Tell him everything. But they'll hang you for this, Caroline cried. I'm an old woman, Sarah said with a sad, dignified smile, and I have a story they'll believe. An old colored woman defending the honor of a young white lady. They might hang me, but they might not. She pushed them toward the back door. Now go! They fled into the chaos of the burning town, stole 2 horses from the livery, and rode north into the night, the glow of redemption's fires lighting their way. They were fugitives now, with the truth in their hands and a posse on their trail. They rode through the night, pushing into the mountains. Near dawn, they found shelter in an abandoned trapper's cabin. They were exhausted, battered, but they were alive, and they had the journal. Caroline fell asleep almost immediately. Cole kept watch, the events of the past days churning in his mind. He woke hours later to find Caroline sitting at a small table, reading the journal. There's something in here, she said, her voice strange. Something about you. She pointed to an entry dated July 1863. It was from her father's time as a chaplain at Gettysburg. Today I ministered to a young sergeant from Illinois, her father had written, Bannister by name. He confessed to me that he had killed a Virginia lieutenant and was tormented by the act, though it was clearly self-defense. The man showed me a locket, which he intended to return to the dead officer's family. Cole stared at the page, the memory flooding back. The kind-faced chaplain he'd helped carry from the field. It was her father. He wrote that I killed him in self-defense, Cole whispered. Yes, she said softly. You've carried this guilt for 22 years, Cole. Perhaps it's time to set it down. Movement in the valley below caught his eye. Riders. At least a half dozen. Tanner and his posse. They were following their trail. They had only a few hours. They prepared for a siege, barricading the door. But it was hopeless. Tanner had 8 men. Surrender, Bannister, the sheriff yelled from the tree line. We have the cabin surrounded. Cole knew what a surrender meant. A rope, for both of them. We need to get the journal to the judge, Caroline whispered urgently. Without it, Sarah will hang for sure. Cole made a decision. He threw their remaining coffee grounds on the fire, creating a thick, acrid smoke that billowed out of the cabin. When I say run, he hissed, you run for the back trail. Don't look back. No, Cole! Go! He threw open the back door. Run! She ran. He followed, throwing more kindling on the fire to feed the smoke screen. Bullets whizzed past them as they plunged into the forest. They scrambled down a steep game trail, Tanner's shouts echoing behind them. They had a head start, but it wouldn't last. They were on foot in the middle of the Wyoming wilderness. They followed an old logging road, pushing east toward an abandoned mining camp Cole knew of. It was their only hope. The sun was low when they saw it, a cluster of dilapidated buildings in a narrow canyon, but there was smoke coming from a chimney and horses in the corral. Someone was there. They crept closer. 4 men sat on the porch of the main cabin, passing a bottle. Hired guns. A twig snapped behind them. They spun around to find a rifle pointed at their faces. Well now, a man drawled. Look what I found. They were marched into the cabin at gunpoint. The leader, a bearded man named Grady, grinned. Bannister and the Bennett woman? Harrington's telegram said we'd be well paid for bringing you in. They were tied to stools, helpless. Jackson's on his way, Grady said. He'll be here by dark. He's looking forward to settling his score with you, Bannister. Cole strained against his ropes. Jackson was supposed to be wounded. If he was coming here, it meant Tanner had sent for him. It meant their time was up. As darkness fell, riders clattered into the camp. Jackson strode into the cabin, his arm in a sling, his eyes burning with hatred. Bannister, he growled. Been waiting for this. He turned to Grady. Good work. Payment as agreed. What about the woman? Grady asked. She hangs with him, Jackson said flatly. Then he glanced at the door. Bring her in. Cole's blood ran cold. The door opened, and a woman in a gray traveling dress stepped inside. As she raised her head, Cole's world turned upside down. It was Sarah Washington, but she wasn't a prisoner. She stood tall and imperious, a look of cold triumph on her face. Well done, Mr. Jackson, she said, her voice no longer that of a humble housekeeper. You've captured our murderers just as I planned. Sarah, Caroline cried out in disbelief. What is this? You confessed. I killed William because he had become a liability, Sarah said, her voice like ice. His obsession with Mr. Bannister was threatening everything we had built. As for my confession, Sheriff Tanner knows better than to arrest me. He works for me now. Cole stared at her, the terrible truth dawning on him. You, he whispered, you were behind Harrington all along. Sarah smiled. Not behind him, Mr. Bannister. Beside him, guiding his grief, using his hatred to build an empire. Did you really think I would spend my life as a servant, without a purpose? She looked at Caroline, her eyes fixed on the journal hidden beneath her shirt. Now, the journal, Miss Bennett. William was a fool for keeping it. Hand it over. As Jackson moved toward Caroline, Cole finally tore his hands free from the ropes. At that exact moment, a gunshot erupted from outside. The window shattered. Grady screamed as a bullet hit his shoulder. Ambush! Someone yelled. In the chaos, Cole lunged, tackling Jackson and sending them both crashing to the floor. Guns blazed from the tree line. Sarah pulled a small pistol, aiming it at Caroline. The journal! She shrieked over the gunfire. Just then, the cabin wall splintered. A rifle shot tore through the wood, hitting Sarah in the side. She staggered, then crumpled to the floor. Cole slammed Jackson's head against the floorboards, knocking him unconscious. He scrambled to Caroline's side. Are you all right? Yes, she gasped. Outside, a familiar voice called out. Bannister, you alive in there? It was Jacob Morgan. We are, Cole yelled back. Thought you might need some help, Jacob said, appearing at the door with a rifle in his hand. Behind him stood 20 armed men, miners, ranchers, the good people of Redemption Valley, who had finally had enough. Turns out, Jacob said with a grim smile, a lot of folks were tired of Harrington's justice. He looked past them, at the dying woman on the floor. We knew, he said quietly. We knew Sarah was the real power, but we could never prove it. Caroline knelt beside Sarah. Why? She asked. All the murders, the lies. For what? A terrible smile touched Sarah's lips. Power, child. William had the name. I had the vision. She coughed, blood flecking her lips. And you, she whispered, her eyes locking on Cole. You took the only thing that ever mattered. She looked at him with an insane, burning hatred. You killed my son, Mr. Bannister. Cole froze. His mind couldn't process the words. Her son? Sarah's eyes glazed over. Robert, he was my boy. William's father would never have allowed the marriage. We kept it a secret. He was all I had. Her voice faded to a whisper. And you took him from me? The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. This was never about land. It was never about the war. It was about a mother's twisted, all-consuming revenge. Jacob helped them to their feet. It's over, he said. We got a telegram through to the judge in Laramie. We sent pages from the journal. Federal marshals are on their way to Redemption right now to arrest Tanner. Relief washed over Cole, so profound he nearly fell. They rode for Laramie, not as fugitives, but as witnesses. They arrived at dawn and went straight to the courthouse. Judge Foster, a tall, stern man with honest eyes, listened to their story. He read the journal, and he believed them. Just as they were finishing, the door burst open. Sheriff Tanner stood there, dusty and furious. Judge, I'm here to take custody of these fugitives. Sheriff Tanner, the judge said calmly, you have no authority here. In fact, I was just issuing a warrant for your arrest. Tanner went for his gun, but before he could draw, his own deputies deserted him, their hands in the air. Federal marshals stormed the room. It was over. The investigation took months. The full extent of Sarah Washington's corrupt empire was brought to light. Tanner and his cronies were sent to prison. Jackson and the hired guns faced the gallows. And Cole Bannister was fully exonerated. Spring came to Redemption Valley. Cole stood on the porch of his rebuilt cabin. The land was healing, and so was the town. Jacob Morgan was the new mayor. He saw a rider approaching. It was Caroline. She had been officially appointed the new minister of the church. I brought you something, she said, handing him a small package. Inside was the gold locket. Judge Foster found it, she explained. It had been kept by a cousin of your mother's all these years. He opened it. The portrait of Elizabeth Harrington, Robert's mother, stared back at him. And for the first time, Cole felt not guilt, but a profound sadness for all the lives destroyed by hatred and grief. He took Caroline's hand. I found something worth building here, he said, something worth staying for. Cole Bannister, she said, a smile lighting up her face. Are you ever going to ask me to marry you? A laugh escaped him, the first real laugh he'd had in years. Caroline Bennett, will you do me the honor? Yes, she said, her eyes shining. Oh, yes. He kissed her as the sun set over Redemption Valley. He had come here looking for a second chance, a place to escape his past. But he had found something more. He'd learned that you can't escape your past. You have to face it. You have to fight for the truth. And in that fight, if you're lucky, you find your redemption. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more tales from the shadows of history. And let me know in the comments, what do you think was the most shocking twist?